So today I just wanted to take a quick look at Alan Smithee, or Alan Smithee, depending on which pronunciation you're more accustomed with, but obviously this was a pseudonym that is used by directors whenever they want to disown a film or they just don't want to be credited for a film that they feel was influenced by someone else. For instance, something that was not their original vision, or just something that they're just not too proud of. So it's definitely an interesting little term. It probably didn't really come to light until maybe the late 90s, early 2000s or so. But this is actually an official pseudonym that is used, or that was employed by the Directors Guild of America. So how this actually came about is fairly interesting, because we have basically an actor to thank for this. This would have been for a Western film called Death of a Gunfighter. This was released in 1969. So basically this term was coined specifically for this event. So basically this actor, Richard Widmark, I'm probably mispronouncing his name, but he had a problem with the director on the film, Robert Totten. So he had him fired. This director worked roughly 25 days on the film. The replacement director came in and worked about 10 days on the film. So he was replaced by Don Siegel. Obviously, the replacement director did not feel it appropriate to take credit for a film that was originally not even his. So he declined the credit. Obviously, the original director also refused, because I imagine he was just butthurt and didn't want anything to do with the project at that point. Obviously, when someone comes in and alters your work, it's also just basically a bastardization of your original vision. So this argument was obviously taken to the Directors Guild. They deemed that the film was not an original vision of either director. So the Alan Smithee or Smith term was basically put into use so that neither director was forced to accept credit for a film that they did not want. So the original pseudonym itself was originally suggested as Al Smith. That was considered to have been too common a name, so it was switched over to Alan Smythe, later Smithee, just to have it, I guess, just stand out a bit more. There's no way that you can actually confuse it with an actual person or someone else. So that was just meant to have it just be more distinct, but not so much stand out that it was kind of like, oh, I know that, you know? But basically what caused the death of the Alan Smithee term was, I guess you could say, an abuse of the term. There was a film called an Alan Smithee film, Burn, Hollywood, Burn. So I'm assuming it was somewhat of a satire, but the fake director in this film, his actual birth name was Alan Smithee, and he wanted to disown the film project that he had worked on. Technically, he couldn't, because the only approved name happened to be his actual name, so he was basically stuck. So apparently this film was so terrible, it received so many bad reviews, but it also brought to light this Alan Smithee term. So it was no longer, on the down low as it had been intended to have been. So essentially, it was this film's fault that the term was retired. So this would have been in 1998. So came basically into use in 1968, and it died in 1998, which, definitely kind of interesting if you look at the numbers there. But, I've obviously haven't seen this film. No one speaks too highly of it, so I really have no interest in watching it. But it is interesting how one film can create a terminology and basically create or provide a safe haven for directors, and then another film can just basically take a dump all over the whole thing and ruin it for everyone else. But it only takes one. We all know how that goes. But Of course, there were certain regulations when using the original Alan Smithee term or the pseudonym. Obviously, directors had to take an oath to silence. They could never say, oh yeah, that was my work, but I disowned it. Obviously, some people still blabbed even though they weren't supposed to, but obviously this one particular film is the one that broke the camel's back. The term itself is not actually entirely dead. It does exist in other areas of media. For example, if a screenwriter does not want to accept credit for a work that they had written, then that Alan Smithee term can still be given. It's used in music videos. You can even see it in comic books. So it still exists. It's just not used for actual film or film directors. So your next question may be, well, if the Alan Smithee term is no longer in use, are directors basically forced to acknowledge films that they don't care for? No, not really. We basically had a different turn. The director of the 2000 film Supernova, which would have been Walter Hill, did not want to accept credit for his film, so he was credited as Thomas Lee for that work. Slightly more common, potentially can be confused with just any regular Joe, but obviously Alan Smithee did evolve or adjust, I guess you could say. So it's definitely a very interesting term. You can go anywhere online, you can Google it, and you can find loads of films that were credited under this pseudonym. Some of these lists will give you the name of the actual director when that director is known, and obviously when unknown it remains completely anonymous. But you know, obviously Alan Smithee is not, you know, some total big secret, but I always thought it just kind of like a little interesting bit as far as, you know, film information or film trivia is concerned. But I don't know, to my knowledge, the first and only film that I have ever seen credited to Alan Smithee would have been The Guardian, which, yeah, you can say it's not that great a film. It's not a perfect film. I still like it, though. Does the world know who actually directed that film? Yes. But, you know, I just kind of think it's just an interesting little industry pseudonym there. So, I don't know. Do you guys have any favorite films that were credited to an Alan Smithee? Or, you know, how did you come to find out about this term? But I would definitely love to share some thoughts with you on that. But that is all I have for you today, and I will talk to you later.